So today's topic is navigating changing lives, what helps? And I'm going to introduce our three speakers and then I'll begin asking them some questions. So I'm going to begin up with Sandra. Sandra, do you want to give everyone a little wave?
Hi.
Hey, Sandra. So Sandra was diagnosed with brainstem cavernoma in 2015 after experiencing facial numbness and problems walking alongside other symptoms. Later that year, unfortunately, Sandra's cavernoma bled and she needed an emergency operation to remove the cavernoma. Complications from the surgery left Sandra with nerve damage to her face, requiring further operations, including operations to her eye and face. Next, I'd like to introduce Carol Hutchins. Carol, do you want to give us a wave?
Hiya.
Hi, Carol. So Carol has spinal cavernoma, and that's a rare form of cavernoma, and it only affects 1 in 200 people living with cavernoma. Carol's spinal cavernoma is located at the top of her spinal cord. So if you know about spinal cords, it's C2. And Carol was diagnosed when she was 39 and had no symptoms to begin with. But in the last 5 years, she's experienced symptoms of muscle weakness, which has impacted her ability to get out and about and do normal day-to-day tasks. And last but not least, Michael. Michael, do you want to give us a wave? Michael, thanks for joining us. So Michael's married to Judith, who has multiple cavernomas in her brain. She has familial cavernoma, and if you don't know what familial cavernoma is, that means it's inherited. Around 20% of people with cavernoma have the familial form. Judith also has intractable epilepsy, which is caused by her cavernomas, and that means that it's resistant to anti-seizure medication. Michael and Judith work together to ensure Judith can keep working, and despite her seizures, Judith's still in work and has access support from Access to Work and is in receipt of PIP, and Michael's going to talk a bit more about that later on. So just before we begin, a reminder, I'm conscious we may have some people on here today who've been newly diagnosed. And I know when you're newly diagnosed, it can be a bit of a worrying time. So just one thing we did want to emphasize is, thankfully, the majority of people with cavernoma, you'll never know. It could be an incidental finding and you have no symptoms. And if you're in that position, we would just reiterate that is the case for the majority of people. However, symptomatic cavernoma is a rarer form. It affects around 1 in 2,700 people of the general population. And today we're focusing on that, when people have symptoms and when that continues and how that affects life and what can help. But we just wanted to add that reminder at the beginning for those who are newly diagnosed and maybe feeling a bit more worried. So that's enough of me talking. I think it's time to move on to our panelists. So Sandra, we're going to begin with you. So our first question, and thank you ever so much for taking part. In the introduction, I told people about how your cavernoma diagnosis and surgery. So would you mind telling us a little bit more about how that has affected you day to day in your day-to-day life?
Yes, it's really hard, I think, to explain some of the how the effects that has been, but obviously that had a very large impact on my life. Obviously, my bleed took all my quality of life, so I've had to rebuild my life. I think a lot of my learning has had to be myself because I was unfortunate that my parents weren't ill and I didn't get the physio that I needed because I was too tired. And obviously my parents were more important to me. But yes, I was left with the facial paralysis. I was really fortunate because I kind of thought I was going to work through this and get my face back by myself. But because the damage of the bleed was so severe this time, it wasn't possible. So in 2019, I had a facial uplift called the Lavu technique. And they said it would be life changing. And obviously, like this evening, you can tell that my speech is fairly fluent, which obviously before that I couldn't, I couldn't hold my speech. So I was very fortunate to have that. that experience of surgery, it was a process, because I had to sort of start off with little lolly sticks to gradually open the mouth, because they lengthen my temporalis muscle. So to avoid snapping that, I had to have that gradual process. As you can see, my eye was affected, and I had a lateral stitch on that when about a month after I got home, because I got an ulcer on my cornea. And then I had a gold weight, but unfortunately, over the 8.5 years, the gold weight has been troublesome towards me. And I had surgery last September, and now the weight is removed. And at the moment, I have no weight. So I have to be very mindful of protecting my eye every day. I was left with a lot of neurological symptoms, and balance is one of my mainly day problems that I have in trying to cope with. And my memory, I have a terrible memory. And since my surgery in last September, because it was a horrible experience I went through, it actually has caused my deficits and enhanced them again. And I have gone on a little bit of a backward healing journey at the moment, but I'm going in different directions, and hopefully I will maintain back to where I was before. That having any kind of surgery like that obviously has a huge impact on us and our daily life, and obviously fatigue is another big one, and also being able to be around people is difficult. And obviously the hardest thing is and was trying to be around my family, and obviously struggling with my grandchildren, which obviously I kind of have involvement with them, but there's lots that I couldn't do. But you make good of everything, or try and make good of every part of that daily life. With my face as well, it wasn't actually until when I kind of was thinking about tonight, and I was thinking that I did, like the facial expressions, you don't get those expressions that you would, and you don't realise how difficult daily, when you have that paralysis, that you don't have that movement, and the struggles that you then get. And obviously, as you can tell, this eye sometimes is very temperamental also, and obviously the tireder I am, the more my symptoms do come forward. But on the whole, I think you just there I go. See, I'm going a little bit blank now, so just bear with me one moment. But each day is a challenge, and we can't deny that. And everything is difficult, and everything takes our energy, because there's a lot of thinking have to go into every day. Where you would just kind of just jump out of bed before, all that thought process, even to put in, your sock, or, something on your clothing, and different things throughout the day. So, it can be quite exhausting to have to try and, maintain that, and find that balance.
I just want to say thank you so much for being so open with us, because we know that there's a lot of people who suffer in silence with Cavernoma, and actually for you to be able to share that with everyone, I know there will be people who are joining us today, and this is going to be resonating, and it's going to be really helpful for people to hear they're not alone. And that's something we often hear people say, is because it's a rarer condition, you can often feel quite lonely and think you're the only person with those symptoms or those feelings. So I really appreciate you talking to us about that. And it's not the easiest thing to talk about. And just you've shared those challenges, and thinking for those people here who joined today's webinar, perhaps at the start of their journey and a little unsure about what's going to help them. And I think, everyone's journey will be different and what helps people will be different, which is why we've got 3 speakers, because you're each going to bring different perspectives. But for you, what are the sort of maybe 3 main things that have really helped you navigate the changes to your life that you've just described?
Acceptance was one thing. I was very, very lucky. I accepted all the changes in myself, even facial. And, I would, when I could get up and about and see people, I made sure that I dyed my hair purple. I put my purple lipstick on, and I would stand out because I still felt lovely within myself. And I think that is really important, because obviously they are major life changers and can affect our lives massively. But I think my belief is in keep on loving yourself, and keep giving yourself gratitude, because that can so easily get lost. Another one is positivity, and I know most people suddenly go back, oh no, don't mention the word positive. And because obviously, how can sometimes you feel positive when such a change has happened in your life? So I try to make positive as a gentle vibration of a word, to not have, to be positive and have a focus. But that positivity can be the smallest little thing. I mean, I always look for that sparkle of light, and that sparkle can be as small as large as that one, and be the growth. But I think if we can just start to understand ourselves and how different we are working, and we start to be kind to ourselves in that way, then our healing journey can begin to whatever level. We're all at different levels, we've all got different symptoms, whether we've gone through whatever kind of brain surgery in the Fonds or wherever it was. But I do believe, being that, giving us that self-worth and kindness, because we are still who we are. And I believe we just work within ourselves as we can, to being kind to ourselves and not putting any pressure on ourselves, because as I said, we are who we are, and acceptance is a huge thing, which does help, I feel personally, the healing. Mindfulness, meditation and breathing are all techniques which have helped me too. And mindfulness don't have to be deep. Some people think they won't meditate because it's so deep they can't do that length of time. You can make it as simple as you want and as short as you want. Breathing is a very good technique to have, because helps with the control, and that helps with the balance. And that is something that I have found, if anxiety or anything come on, the breathing technique, the mindfulness, the meditation, I find that really help. Being open, that's what I done right from the beginning. When I first went into a shop, I couldn't manage it, and I could start to feel the anxiety. And I thought, no, Sandra, this is you, and this is how your days are going to move forward. And so I openly said I couldn't remember what I'd got to do. And the assistant was absolutely amazing. And I had a queue so long behind me. And she helped me through. And at the end, I just apologized to the people, and they were all like so kind towards me. And I still do that today, because I have my little shop that I've got. It's only a small shop, but I explain everything. So people know if I'm not okay, then they'll help me, so I can have a little part of being in the community. So I think that is very, very important. Obviously, those who know me, I love my angels. I love working within my angels. I love surrounding myself. It's on a very soft vibration. It's just something that brings me comfort, and also someone to talk to. And and I just get that understanding, that love, and that's just another way that I have found to help me on my healing journey. And it is that I think the most important things as well is the understanding. And we know that some people will understand us and some people won't, and it can get very, very hard. But I think if we keep mindful that if they haven't experienced anything like this themselves, or they haven't had to care for anybody, they can't understand. And because we can't see what's wrong with us, when my face was really paralyzed, I got a lot more understanding because it was seen, that there was something wrong. Now, when people look at me and they see me kind of normal, it's very hard for people to understand that what I'm going through on a daily basis. So I think for ourselves as well is to find that understanding. But it is self-care, and yeah, just not trying to be too hard on yourself as well when we're going through things, which is very difficult when you've either got your first diagnosis and you are on that journey, and you do feel alone and you don't know how to manage it. But I think it is very, very important just to keep your self-worth, and just keeping the understanding that you need to help you on a daily basis. And if you can't do something, try not to beat yourself up about it, and just try as much as you can, and do it steadily. If it means it take you ages to do it. I mean, I remember trying to decorate my tree. It took me over 3 hours because when I looked, most of it was laying on the floor, what I thought was on branches. And I do laugh at myself a lot. My family get quite annoyed with me, but I do find myself very, very funny. Yeah, I think it is just bringing a bit of humour as well into it. And
Sandra, for those of us that are on the closed Facebook group, you really role model what you're talking about. I love the post that you do where you share like an uplifting poem or a thought, and I think you really show others, the importance and value of that self-care and kindness. And I think you've raised such an important point there as well about, particularly for people where it may not be obvious to others, it's not always easy to say, actually, this is what's going on, I need a bit of help. And I think by you saying this today, that helps give other people permission to give that a go. So thank you so, so much for sharing all that. I think a lot of points I know will be resonating with other people here. And I'd love to hear more, but I'm going to move on to Carol now. So Sandra, thank you. Thank you ever so much. Carol, I'll just unmute you here, and I'm just going to pop you, Sandra, on mute, if that's okay. Hi, Carol.
Hi.
Hello. So we just heard from Sandra and about Sandra's story and then what's helped. And I was reflecting how for Sandra, her symptoms presented quite quickly and then the diagnosis. And whereas for you, it's a little different in that actually you had a period without symptoms and the symptoms have come on. And I was just wondering, do you feel comfortable maybe sharing with us a little bit more about some of the challenges you've been facing? And then we can talk a little bit about what's helped.
Yeah, sure. My symptoms, sort of after 10 years or so of having nothing, came on quite slowly. I've got dexterity in my left hand, profoundly myelopathic in my left arm. My balance and walking is absolutely horrendous. So I now have a walking stick. I have grab rails around my bath so I can get in and out to have a shower. I've got a frame around the toilet, which helps me get up rather than use the radiator. Things like getting dressed, I struggle with that. Even if it's just not socks, because you have to put the leg, trying to lift your leg up to put the sock in. I struggle with stairs. I was struggling with driving. And it's the little things, that the opening of packets of crisps, folding, even putting up washing on the clothes horse, because I can't lift my left arm as high as I could do. It is very, very frustrating. Food preparation. It's although the walking and balance is the bigger issue, it's the little things that I really struggle with.
And those little things are really important, aren't they? As you were saying, like opening up a crisp packet, that's incredibly frustrating.
And to think that I find I can't cut up my dinner, to find that I have to ask somebody to do it for me. Or we were in a restaurant once, and one of the staff, she noticed I was struggling. She asked me if the kitchen could cut my meat up for me, and then, which I thought was quite helpful and quite nice, because not as embarrassing, because I didn't have to ask for it. But it is, as I say, that cling film is a nightmare as it is, but it's yeah.
As you say, when people sort of uh, uh, don't just wait to be asked, but actually are offering, that's nice when people do that. And now thinking about what's helped then. So you've talked about, quite a few practical, challenges that you've been facing with your spinal cavernoma. Would you feel comfortable sort of telling us sort of, the things that you found have helped the most? Maybe there's other people on the webinar today who have recently started getting these symptoms and aren't quite sure where to begin. What would yours, what do you
I
recommend?
do a Pilates every Thursday, and on Monday I do a one-to-one reformer Pilates, where it's more controlled because you've got straps and everything to use. I've had adult social services came around to assess my flat, especially the bathroom. I also took DWP to tribunal for PIP, which I won eventually. And I get PIP and Motability for indefinitely at the higher rates. So that helps me now with a Motability car that is now fully automatic, and I've only got one, what's the word, adaptation, so I can indicate using my right hand instead of my left. I've had the housing people put in a new handrail on the opposite side of the rails, so I can climb up the stairs properly, or as properly as can be, with shopping, rather than try and crawl up there sideways. I noticed Sandra said about acceptance, and I don't think I've accepted that. Not, yeah, no, I haven't. No, I haven't, and I don't think I will, actually, because my disabilities are ongoing. They'll only worsen, and there's not very much I can do to put them at bay.
Carol, thank you for sharing that and saying that, because everybody's experience is different and everybody's approach and outlook is, and that's absolutely okay. And I think sometimes people may think, well, this is how I should be feeling, that's how I should be feeling. And we've done this as a panel, not as one person, to show the different experiences within the community. And I think your honesty and transparency there is going to be really valued by people listening. And Cal, just going back a bit, you talked about adult social care, and there may be some people thinking, well, how do I go about? Does that happen automatically? Does the doctor sort that out, or do I need to? So if someone's wondering, well, how can I get adult social care in to help me? How did you go about getting them involved?
I think, if I remember correctly, I think I phoned the council up myself, or Googled it on their website to see how they would help me. because I was having trouble with getting up and down from the settee. So they came round and put some risers on them. So I made contact myself to the social services, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and for people joining today, in theory, you should be referred, and in practice, we find a lot of people aren't. So, if you're struggling, it may be the case that you might be entitled to support, like Carol, and Googling adult social care for your county and getting their number could be a good way to approach it. And Carol, when you talked about those assessments, if I understand correctly, you had an occupational therapist come and have a little look at what was needed. Maybe could you tell people a little bit more about what they did? Because some people might be listening and thinking, oh, I didn't even know that this was an option to get this sort of support.
Oh, crikey, what did you do?
Put you on the spot there, haven't I?
Yeah. Sitting on the settee, she measured the length from the knee, sort of top of the settee seat down to the floor, and then worked out that I would need risers. And then she looked in the bed into the bathroom, and said we can put grab rails here, here, and here. And she also, because I was also going for my PIP tribunal, she incorporated in her report about how I get in and out of bed, and the fact that I couldn't lift my leg up properly. And she's also given me a little step, so if which I probably need to start using now, so I can step on that and lift my leg up to get into the bath when I have a shower. But I'm not using that at the moment because I want to still sort of try and keep moving my left leg as much as I possibly can.
Carol, thank you for sharing that. And if anyone's interested in finding out more about occupational therapists and the assessments they can do and the aids they can recommend, we've done a post on social media. I think that went out today or it's tomorrow. So do take a look. And Carol, just lastly, before I move on to Michael, so you've talked about PIP. So for those who haven't heard that term before, it's called a personal independence payment. And Carol, you shared you have to go to tribunal, which, if people aren't aware, it's really common to be turned down, and it's really common you have to fight for it. But Carol, would you mind saying a bit more about, what helped when you went to tribunal, and what does that mean practically, sort of each month in terms of, the difference it makes?
I was turned down twice for PIP. Once because my first application, you answer the question, can you do this? And you say, yes, I can, but not without help. My financial advisor told me, no. You say, no, I can't do that unless I've got my walking stick with me, unless I do. Always answer the questions no. My second application, it was done by Zoom. She thought I had normal movement in both arms and wrist, the fact that I can't lift my left arm above my head. So we went to tribunal, and you have a doctor, a judge, and there was a lady there from one of the disability departments. And they ask you questions and they talk about your everyday life and can you do. And the doctor was asking me about my journey from my home to the station, and my brother worked out that was 0.3 of a mile, and he said, no, I cannot do that unless I start. It used to be a 5-minute journey. It now takes 25 minutes because I have to keep stopping and starting. The judge asked you various questions about your day-to-day, and the lady from the disability unit department, she was asking me about how I got my medication out of the packets. And so you say you're sitting on the bed and you sort of try and flick them out. Mum and my brother said the doctor was looking at my hand all the time to see how it claws. The fact that I did have a stumble when I walked through the door might have helped as well, but that was obviously unintentional. It means I get £437 a month daily living allowance, which will now because if I have to get a cab, I use that for cab fares if I have to go anywhere. It helps with shopping, getting the shopping delivery, because if it's too heavy, I can't bring that in myself. So that goes towards that. The Motability part, I don't receive. That goes straight to Motability. So I can get a car, which was there, sort of set for me to use, because I was struggling with gears, indicating. And now I've got a sporty little car that has really sort of increased my confidence, got my confidence back in driving.
Yeah, I think what I've taken from that, and I hope others have as well, is it could have been easy to go, they've said no. Okay, it's no hope. And you had to fight that, and you fought it twice. But actually going through that, because it's not easy, actually the outcome means you get a substantive payment that can be used for things that really help. So
Definitely.
I hope that gives others hope that don't be too deterred if they say no first time, because you're a great example. And the tips you gave there of reframing it as a no, I can't unless I have, rather than going, oh yes, I can if. Really good points.
Definitely.
Carol, thank you ever so much. And I think it's so important we hear from people with both brain cavernoma and spinal cavernoma, and we keep in mind that this condition, whilst it's rarer, it can affect the spine as well. So thank you very much for talking to us this evening.
Oh, you're welcome.
So I'm now going to come on to Michael. So I'm just going to mute you, Carol, and then I'll mute Michael. Hi, Michael.
Hello.
Hello. So, last but not least, we come to you. And unlike Sandra and Carol, you don't have cavernoma yourself. Your wife does. So you're supporting someone with cavernoma. And then just as I asked Sandra and Carol, I was just wondering if you might feel comfortable sharing a bit about how life changed for you and Judith when she discovered she had cavernoma.
Yeah. So Judith was diagnosed with cavernoma about 6 months before we got married. And what led to the diagnosis was one night in late 2012, she had a seizure in bed where she punched me in the face. And we kind of didn't think too much of it. I know that sounds really weird, but we didn't. Until we decided, we're getting married, we need to get this dealt with. So we pushed for Judith to have an MRI, and then, as many people who've been diagnosed will have received, you get the phone call to say there's something in the MRI, you have to have another one, we have to get more detail, etc. And you kind of get the relief that it's a cavernoma until you realize that there are other symptoms that come along with it. And for Judith, those symptoms were seizures, basically, on a fairly regular basis. And ever since her diagnosis, we've had ups and downs. We've had periods of time, even up to sort of a year or 18 months, where she's been completely clear of seizures, thanks to the medication. And then we've had periods of time like we have now, where they are completely random, can happen in, once every couple of days, once a day, a couple of times a day, more than that. We honestly don't know. Sometimes they have an obvious cause. Sometimes they don't have an obvious cause. It may be that it's a day where Judith hasn't had much to drink, and that's what's caused it. It may be that the cavernoma just decided today it's going to wake up and cause mayhem. And it caused it. That's the biggest problem that we have, is because it's unpredictable, because the seizures themselves have a big impact on Judith when they happen, even if it's just a singular one, that planning for anything is very difficult. There are the number of things that we've either had to turn down because we just can't commit to something because of what's happening at a given point, or we've at the last minute had to cancel it because we've been preparing, we've got as far as getting into the car, and unfortunately Judith had a seizure in the car, or on the way to the car, or insert any of the many different times there. And I think it changes a lot of things, because it takes a while for people, even close family, to realize that actually, we're not cancelling because we fancy just cancelling and doing nothing. We're cancelling because there is a real concern that something could happen. And we've gone from, Judith's seizures can be things where she can recover at home quite easily within half an hour and everything's okay, all the way up to, we're going to A&E again, to the point where we know what goes on in A&E. We've been there that many times that I'm fairly confident I get a free coffee next time we go. So, it's swings and roundabouts and ups and downs that happen. It's the unpredictability that causes all of the problems. You have things like, if we go somewhere to eat, or we go to a friend's house, we have to think about where Judith's going to sit. Is that a seat that she could fall out of if she has a seizure? If she could fall out of it, will she hurt herself? Can somebody get to her in time to help her if something was to happen, or at all if something was to happen? People are very surprised when they come to witness the seizures, that actually they can be as simple as she just falls down and they're easy to deal with, to fully fledged, my wife has turned into the Incredible Hulk and is going to flip your very expensive, very heavy dinner table that you didn't think anybody could move. Well, it's about to move. And it can be difficult to explain to people who haven't experienced it or have only experienced us having to cancel something, that, we can't do the thing that they're asking us to do, because if we commit to that, there could be something stressful that comes along that's going to cause a problem, and we have to be very careful about it, or that's happening at a point where we don't think that's a very good idea, or it's too dangerous for us to do, all those kinds of things. And it has an impact on everything you do, family events that you very much want to go to, but we have to be honest and sensible, because, for example, we have young nieces. We don't have children of our own, but we do have nieces, and we want to go and be involved in their lives and turn up to birthday parties and turn up to events and things at their school and all that kind of stuff when we're invited. But at the same time, we really don't want them to witness Judith having a seizure, even though that has happened on a few occasions. And the one thing I can say is, kids are great with that. You always worry about what's going to happen, but actually, 9 times out of 10, the kids are just, the last time that happened, I need to start packing up the game they were playing with Auntie Judith. Instead of worrying, stressing, or doing anything, they were packing up the game to make sure it was out the way. Then they stayed out the way and then just went, is everything okay? Can we give her a cuddle before we go? That kind of thing. It changes a lot about your day-to-day life. You have to plan things a little bit more, but at the same time, you have to be prepared for the fact that that plan's about to go completely out of the window. And that's a thing that causes a lot of problems, and most people are okay with it. I'm sure most people here will have experiences with a symptom that they have, or an issue they have, or a condition that they have, where they have to explain that to people. And 9 times out of 10, people are absolutely great with it. Those few times when they aren't, or those few times where they don't understand until the very last minute, or where people are well-meaning, my experience of unfortunate occasions where Judith's been ill, and had a seizure in the street, having to explain that having sort of 5 people on the phone to 999 isn't helping. Everybody except that person has to hang up so we can deal with what's in front of us. Explaining that, yes, the main event, the main seizure that people are saying has passed, but the postdictal period, so for people who don't know about seizures, that the period of recovery afterwards, which we describe as a brain rebooting, effectively, she may have stood up and she may be typing away on her keyboard, because this has happened when she's in work. She may be typing away on her keyboard, but the honest reality is, has anybody looked to see what she's typing? Because it's rubbish. Because she's not fully functional yet, unfortunately. That postdictal period is still going on. It's still happening. And effectively, the seizure is still ongoing. You've seen the shaking bits, or bits where she falls over. There's a long period of recovery that comes after that most people overlook because they don't experience it directly. Because once that bit's done, they feel, they'll leave her with the person who knows how to look after her. But that takes, another hour or so for her to feel better. And then she's exhausted for the rest of the day, which 9 times out of 10 leads to another seizure happening later that day, which means anything else you had planned for that day, if a seizure happens at 9 o'clock in the morning, 9 times out of 10 you're not going to be able to do it. there's no guarantee Judith will feel up to being able to do anything for the rest of that day. It can destroy all kinds of stuff.
Well, you made the point there about kids, and I thought that was just a very special thing to say, how the children get it. They know
Yeah.
intuitively what to do. They take it at face value, and they whereas adults aren't always the best. And I think
My finding has always been that adults, you tend to find there's three sets of people when it comes to an emergency, like an immediate emergency, like a seizure or some other kind of medical emergency. There's the calm under pressure, just gets on with helping and doing what needs to be done person, and they're the ones that you want. There's the passerby that might stop to look, but they're not actually going to get involved. And then there's what I refer to as the hero of the piece. And that's the person who is very well meaning, because everybody is in that circumstance. They're very, very well meaning, but they want to be involved in whatever is going on, whatever the attention is needed, they want to provide that. They want to, if we need someone to call 999, they'll do it. The problem is they're not the only person there who's doing it. So you've got that person there, over there, over there,
and
over
it's you,
there.
Michael, like trying to fend them all off.
Often, if you're the last person to arrive on the scene, which has happened to me a couple of times, because Judith, I don't need to be following and shadowing Judith everywhere she goes, because at the end of the day, nobody wants that. Judith had that in work, and it's awful. It's an awful scenario for her. But if I'm the last person to arrive on the scene, I need to know what's happened. I don't need 18 people telling me their version of events and when they arrived and when they're collected. But again, everybody's well-meaning. It's not to pick on people. It's that actually you become very aware in these circumstances, particularly out in public, that actually a large percentage of the population don't know what to do in a medical emergency. And, they either commit to myths that they've heard, like, we'll put something in her mouth, she's having a seizure. And it's like, no, absolutely not. All the way down to, oh, she's having a seizure, she'll be fine in 5 minutes, just let her recover, it'll all be good.
I'm thinking about, I was really struck there by, Judith's still in work, and she's also having seizures that aren't always controlled and can involve drop seizures. And there may be some people here who are thinking, well, could I carry on being in work if I was experiencing this? And it's fabulous. Judith and you clearly have a close relationship there, and you're a very strong advocate for her, as is Judith for herself. And I think people probably be really interested to know, what's really helped keep Judith in work, and how have you, as Judith's husband, supported her with that?
So Judith's been both lucky and unlucky with the nature of the company she works for and the individual bosses that she's had. She's had the bosses that everything from the boss that cares too much, which doesn't particularly help, all the way through to the boss that just doesn't give a flying monkeys, and everything in between, because of the length of time that she's been diagnosed and had the seizures. And what we found tends to help is going in and educating, making sure Judith informs people like first aiders on site, which will happen in most companies, making sure I'm being upfront that people know what's happening. You don't want the first time the company finds out that Judith has seizures to be when she has a seizure in front of them. If they know in advance, 90% of your battle is making sure they know in advance, so they know what to do in that event. They know not to panic, to deal with it. It's a thing that we know can happen, and it's about educating them on what that right thing to do is. A lot of the time for adjustments in work, it's things like, if she does have a seizure, they need to make sure they tell me, because sometimes we've had situations where she's had a seizure in work, but it's been a relatively minor one in comparison to what's happened before, and they've decided not to tell anybody, not even, and assuming Judith knows. Well, she doesn't. She won't have any recollection about it at all. And so if they don't tell me as Judith's carer, effectively, we can't do anything about it later that evening. So it tends to lead to a second or a third or worse seizures, and that's not a situation you want to be in. So for work, we tend to use we started out when Judith was first diagnosed. She worked quite a distance away and she used to drive to work. Obviously, as soon as the seizure started, that had to stop, unfortunately. So we used a service called Access to Work, which we've discovered not many people know exists. And Access to Work works on the principle that they'll come and assess you, and they don't limit what they're going to recommend to you. And in some cases, they'll pay for what the adjustments that are needed. In some cases, they'll tell your employer that it's part of their requirement for the employees. And in other circumstances, they'll go 50-50 with the employer. Like, for example, if you need a specific headset or a piece of software, they'll go, like if you need to be able to talk to the computer rather than typing, then they'll go half as with the license for that, because it's not always very particularly cheap or easy to learn how to use. Thankfully, Judith hasn't been in that circumstance. Most of the Access to Work stuff that Judith uses is twofold. At her current employer, they have what they call a privacy shield. It's normally used for first aid, so that if Judith does have a seizure, they can pull that round her. It can move around the office wherever she goes. It can be pulled around her to provide her with some privacy during the seizure, and then it stops other employees from sort of what's happening over there. People know. They know to just let whoever's dealing with it deal with it. She also uses Access to Work for taxis. So the way that the service works is we have to find out how much it would cost Judith to use public transport to get to work. But because of her seizures, using public transport is just a no-go, because if something was to happen or a bus was to be late, we don't know where she would be if something was to happen or if help was available. So she uses taxis to get to and from work, and what they do is Access to Work pay for the taxi, but Judith has to pay a proportion of that, which is normally the fee it would cost if she had to go by public transport. So, for example, her current employer is quite close, within 3 miles of the house. So for the taxi, it's relatively cheap, but on public transport, she'd have to go into town and then back out again effectively in order to get a bus. That's just a no-go. It takes about an hour. It would add a whole bunch of stress that would inevitably lead to seizures. So Judith goes, so we use Access to Work for that. The other thing that we were able to do with her current employer is we identified with both their help and mine and Judith's and her doctors, we were able to identify when Judith is most at risk of seizures happening, which tends to be in the afternoon. So what happens is at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Judith comes home and works the final couple of hours for work from home, and organizes her day around that. And the idea behind that is if a seizure happens during that danger time between 2 o'clock and sort of 4:30, 5 o'clock when she finishes, she's already at home. So the effect is fairly minimal. There's no worry about, well, how are we going to get her home? I'm immediately available. I'm literally just down the corridor from her, that kind of thing. So it helps massively for reducing her stress as well, because it means if she's had a stressful day, she knows 2 o'clock, she's coming home, she can spend that time doing paperwork and other things a little bit more relaxed, in a more relaxed environment that she's completely in control of. That's a lucky thing. That's not something that can always apply to everybody, but it's something where it's worth discussing, because people do have the right to ask for flexible working, and it does help. Having the ability to having Access to Work and knowing that if we needed to, we could contact Access to Work and say she needs more of a review in work in the office to discover, does she need a better seat? So one that she can't fall out of. Does she need, a different keyboard and mouse? Or does she need, those are things that at the moment Judith doesn't need, so we haven't asked for that, but it is an option that's there. At the same time, it helps to have a good employer, a company that actually cares, and a manager that actually cares. We've been in situations before where Judith had a manager that over cares. So Judith was under instruction; she couldn't get up from her desk without somebody with her. She couldn't go to the bathroom without somebody being with her. She couldn't move to another area of the office without somebody being with her. Somebody had to walk her to where the taxi picked her up, and she had to call when she was getting close so that somebody could be there which all removes your independence and doesn't help the person. It actually adds to their stress and the more likelihood of something happening. So her current employer, the taxi can be seen outside the window. So she has various people that will call out, Judith, your taxi's here, or in the first thing in the morning, she can walk straight from a taxi straight into the office without having to worry about people not seeing her or not knowing where she is.
I think,
It's quite
Michael,
helpful.
Yeah, you've shared some really practical examples, and I think that point of getting a manager who is in the middle of that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Some people might not have thought about is the kind of that overcaring actually can be just as unhelpful as the lack of. Michael, I think it's fantastic that you've talked about access to work, because I know as the charity manager here, so many people still don't know about this.
Yeah.
And that they have the right to approach them for it.
A lot of people know about things that we use, like as Carol talked about earlier, like PIP. PIP is a really difficult one because it requires you. It's really, really, really horrible thing to apply for. They ask for incredibly invasive information that actually a lot of people don't feel like they want to answer. And as Carol said, you have to phrase it as well, actually, I can't without, not yes, I can if I've got. You also have to be careful in that. One of the things we were told when Judith was applying is do it on your worst day. So we do it as Judith's had a seizure that day. What can she do? If she's had a seizure, the answer is nothing. Literally, it's not feasible. When it comes to access to work, you have to be honest about what it is you can do. And the thing that we've found very helpful is things like a blue badge. We barely use it because we only use it when we absolutely have to. But we use the blue badge when I need to move the car closer to Judith to get her into the car, because if she's postictal, it's almost impossible to get her into a car without it.
Another really good example, Michael. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to bring us to an end there for this bit. But I'm like, for all of you, I was like, oh, there's so much more. There's so much more that could be said. And I think I'm going to just do a bit of a recap before we open up to Q&A. First of all, thank you to all three of you. It's not an easy thing to talk about challenges that you're facing, and also you've been so candid about what helps. And what I was reflecting is, we've got some really practical things there, like PIP, access to work, OT assessments, but also the other side of that, the emotional side about acceptance, where you're at with that, talking to friends and family. And Sandra, you also talked about faith. So there's so many different types of things that could help. And to everybody who's joined us today, what we're hoping is you're going to hear the breadth of that. And hopefully within that, there'll be some things that resonate for you and you think, actually, that might be something that really helps me. So we're now going to move into the Q&A section, and we're going to allow about 15 minutes or so. And if you haven't already done so, please do put your questions into the Q&A section. Just before I'm going to go through those, I'm just going to pick up a couple of comments. But Sandra, Michael, Carol, you may not see this, but we've got some lovely comments here. Someone just said, very proud of everyone. What naturals in front of the camera, wonderful examples of lived experiences. That's so nice. And someone else here, I heard, I scanned it a minute ago, said, well done everyone for sharing your experiences. It will help, and it's interesting to hear everyone's story in a different way. So I can see it's already, people are really appreciating this. So just whilst people put in any questions to the panelists that they have in the Q&A, that I've just noticed there's a couple of questions in the comments that I'm just going to go through. We have a question from somebody asking about the risk there in terms of unfortunately, could you die from cavernoma? So just to say, the risk of death with cavernoma is extremely, extremely low. You have things like AVMs where blood flows really, really fast through, and they can be very dangerous when they bleed. With cavernomas, the flow of blood's actually very slow. And that means the risk of death from a bleed is much, 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 much lower than for many other conditions. So to say it can be a possibility, but very, very low one. And we've got a member here who shared her experience with the challenges for her daughter, who's held under the Mental Health Act. And there's some points shared about that, about the challenges with the care. Unfortunately, we have some experiences of really good care and some experiences where care isn't what it should be. If people aren't already aware, there's an organisation called PALS. So if you have problems in a hospital, look up PALS or ask for the PALS information leaflet, and they're there to be on your side and to raise a complaint and to support you in terms of getting help with that. I think there was just one other point there. And someone just saying, oh yeah, we've got another question here. So I'm now going to move into, or actually just one quick question, which was, well, I'm going to ask this to the panelists actually and see who'd like to respond. So Tom says, given that the symptoms of Cavernoma vary so greatly, how difficult is it to prepare someone after they receive a diagnosis? I don't know if any of our panelists would like to respond to that. So I'll just repeat that again. So Tom says, given that the symptoms vary so greatly, sorry, how difficult is it to prepare someone after they receive a diagnosis? Would anyone like to try to answer that one? And I'm just going to unmute you all so you can, Carol, I think you're going to.
Yeah, when I was first diagnosed, because I didn't have any symptoms, my consultant neurosurgeon said, by all means, Google it, but don't go too far, otherwise you'll be even more screwed up than you already are. But I don't think so. As I say, from sort of 2006 all the way up to about 2018, I didn't have any symptoms. It was the symptoms I started to get, which I didn't necessarily know about. So that's what you're not prepared for.
I think the
Michael.
the thing we've experienced is that when it comes down to Cavernoma, you have to be the expert in the room, even when you're sitting there with the doctor and the neurologist. And the reason for that is very simple. I've lost count of the number of A&E doctors that have told us, oh, no, Cavernomas don't cause anything. And I'm literally sitting there going, why do you think I'm
You
here?
do, yeah.
Why do you think I'm here? Do you think we just went, well, you know what? We're bored on a Friday night. I know, Judith, why don't you have a seizure and I'll take you to A&E and we'll see how it goes. No, you know, that it does cause problems. The unfortunate problem is I did get a little bit of information from a friend of ours who is a doctor, which is when they're trained on Cavernomas, they're not given very long because there's that much to learn about when people are becoming a doctor. It's understandable. But one of the first things they're told is Cavernomas themselves don't cause problems, which is technically true. The Cavernoma itself isn't the thing that causes the problem. It's the damage it causes around itself that is the problem. And therefore, technically, the line of Cavernomas don't do anything. That's technically true. But then so is the point of a nail line on the road doesn't cause any problems. Well, technically, it doesn't till a car drives over it. You know, then it pops the tire and you have all kinds of problems and shenanigans from there. It's a weird thing that to be prepared for, you know, to prepare somebody after they receive a diagnosis, the key thing is to tell them that, you know, there are things that can be done. Sometimes it is as simple as wait and see, and sometimes you just need to, you know, not think on it too much. It's much easier to say than to actually do, because the number of people we see in the support group that have no symptoms but are terrified because they've been told they've got this thing in their head and they've no idea. And some of them come away with the wildest things that I'm not going to repeat now because it just leads to people thinking that it's a real thing. The reality is, if you have no symptoms, carry on. You know, there's no reason not to.
And I think the point there, it's about the uncertainty. So if you're newly diagnosed on this webinar today, you might be thinking, well, currently I've got no symptoms, might I? And we know that's really hard for people. Just in case you're on the webinar, you don't already know, Cavernoma Alliance UK offers 4 free sessions of online counselling, and we don't currently have a waiting list. So if you're on your own right now, really worrying about your diagnosis, get in touch. Email our helpline. It's helpline@cavernoma.org.uk. Go on our website. There's a section there about counselling. We need you to be a member, but it's free and easy to sign up. You can do that on our website, and we'd love to hear from you. We also run a buddying service, the helpline. You can email in questions, but we don't want you to be alone with how you're feeling, and it's okay to feel a whole range of different things. So we've got 4 questions that I can see that have come up in the Q&A. So I'm going to read out the first question, and that is, how do people respond to you or the person you care for when you're there? And the condition, it's sometimes often, but times not. So I'll just repeat that again. How do people respond to you or the person you care for when you're there? And the condition, it is sometimes often, but other times not. I think it's that kind of the variability in the symptoms. Maybe Sandra, do you want to talk about this one? And because you talked about dealing with people coming into your shop, and how do you find people respond?
To be quite honest, in my shop, that everybody has been absolutely amazing. That's the first time I think I've ever felt nobody judge me, look at me. They have all just accepted me. I mean, as I said, I always explain because I make mistakes, and some of them I just hand over my machine and I let them put in whatever the figure is, and they do it. But I know, they're all become a bit like a big family towards me, because I've spoken out and shared. I've helped a lot of people. I've even met people there who have had loved ones or have Cavernomas themselves or been through that journey. And also by sharing what I've got to say, I've also helped people with cancer and stuff like that. So it's actually like become a little bit of a hub as well, which I used to have a beauty business before this happened, and I was a healer, and very much I have quite a strong intuition, and I'm very good with people, and that was a hub. And this is how the shops becomes almost like people come in and we have conversations. And that's why I do get the people who I can sense don't want to hear what I've got to say and haven't got the time, but I'll still go it because that gives me as well, as I said, part of being in the community, which I hadn't had up until properly since in my little shop. And I'm lucky, it's just a small unit. I share it with my daughter. I've got 2 friends who come in voluntarily to help me. So I'm not in there, like 9 till 5 and things like that, because I wouldn't cope, kind of thing. But yeah, I think it's well worth it and give an understanding. And as I said before as well, people are so judgmental, and they're quick to judge before they know anything. And as I also said, we have to be mindful of that, because people who haven't experienced anything, they don't know how to understand it. But yes, I'm very strong on that, is speak out and never feel that you shouldn't, because that is a way forward. And just quickly back to Carol with acceptance. That's why when I spoke, I tried to say, don't focus when I say like positivity, don't think, how can I be positive? Why did she talk about that? Because this and this is happening to me. That's why I'm saying keep the acceptance, keep the positivity on a very light vibration. And, you just work within that. And the more that you understand that and understand what you're going through on a daily basis, you will help yourself feel that healing, and you will get more balance, and you'll get more energy within yourself that will give you more self-worth and confidence what you're going through. And rather having those thoughts that you're feeling, you will gradually see that they will start to disappear. And
Well, I hope so.
yeah, honestly, I mean, we haven't talked for ages, so we'll have to have a little chat again. But that's why staying positive, that can be frightening, and acceptance. And I was very lucky, and sometimes I'm not sure how I did that, but I kind of laugh, and I often say to people, I've come back half angel and half human, and I quite believe what I went through, when I went through from what happened to me, because I felt nothing worse could happen to me after, you know, when you've had your life suddenly whipped away from you, how can anything get much worse? And then obviously my mother went ill a year after, so I had to wake up and I had to move forward. So my healing was very much done on a personal basis of myself, and a journey that I walked quite alone, and it was very, very difficult, a very hard experience. But that's why, you know, that's why when I do speak and how I do speak, and that's why I try and speak within on a gentle way to give everyone hope in that way, you know, and it is from a different heart and way of you know, moving forward.
And Sandra, I just want to say thank you to you and Carol and Michael for joining today, because all of you have taken that decision to share your stories to help others. And that's such a powerful thing to do. And I know, Sandra, you've talked about how that's part of your healing, is that sharing, which I think is really, you know, very special. And a word I sort of really took from that conversation was about a journey. Everybody who's joining the webinar today, those, you know, to our panelists, you're all at different stages in that journey. For some people, you may have had surgery and, you know, it's focused on that healing. For some, the symptoms may be carrying on pre-surgery. We've got ongoing symptoms because surgery isn't an option. And I think that acknowledgement, we're all at different points in that, and that's okay in terms of where we are. And also there's a lot to learn from others on their journeys. Carol, I'll just bring you in there.
Yeah, I must say that people are fascinated about what it is and what, because it's so rare. They seem to be quite interested about all this. I mean, we had a Christmas quiz last year where we made a donation to the CAUK, and I think people are generally interested in what it is because it's so rare.
Yeah, and I love it when people show an interest. I'm like, yes, go on, get. You know, I'm passionate about Cavernoma. I just think there's such an opportunity for more to be done, and there's so many exciting research developments. If anyone would like to know more about research, our US partner Alliance to Cure has a fantastic section on their website, and there's a lot of hope there. You know, I'm really hopeful that in the not too distant future, there may be medications to treat Cavernoma, and we won't just be reliant on wait and see neurosurgery or stereotactic radiosurgery. So I think it is a time to be hopeful. I'm just going to pick up a couple of comments that have come up in the chat. So one person is asking about headaches and pain management. If you're on social media and you follow us on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn, do a search for headaches. And not so long ago, I think it's in the last month or so, we did a post on that and recommendations on headache management. About half of people are thought to have headaches with Cavernoma. It's really common. So have a look for that post, and also on our closed Facebook group. It's a topic that comes up quite regularly. So do a search for headaches. And if you're not on our closed Facebook group, please do request to join. It's a great source of peer support. And we've had some comments there about misdiagnosis. Unfortunately, that is very common. And just to check with you three, was anyone misdiagnosed before they got their diagnosis the first time?
I was no, not misdiagnosed, but the way looking at because I was having extremely painful pins and needles in my left hand. So they thought, oh, it could be carpal tunnel syndrome, it could be a trapped nerve, and then the MRI found out that it was a Cavernoma. So I was sort of investigated for other things, but not necessarily diagnosed with yes, it's this, yes, it's that, until it was yes, it's a Cavernoma.
Mine took years and years of going backwards and forwards. And then when I finally did get my MRI, they told me I'd got a bag of fluid and I would go to Cambridge and just have that drained and go back to a normal life. And that's when I went to Cambridge to be told that I'd got the Cavernoma cyst in my brainstem taken up, you know, the best part of my brainstem. And also the other thing they did put me on the journey was that it was all in my mind. And I was told to see a psychiatrist, and I was wasting a busy clinic's time. So there are different, some people get seen straight away and some do. It took me years and years of different symptoms and backwards and forwards. They'd done a sinus operation on me because they said sinuses, and after that I was 100% worse, and they still wouldn't acknowledge me. And that was only the fact that when literally I was getting so poorly, and then the facial paralysis, and I was shaken, that I just begged them to listen. And that was when they first looked me in the eye and realised that something was definitely going on. But that took a lot of years. That's why it's really important to have to push, although we don't want to when we feel poorly, and make sure you just got someone beside you as well, who can, take over when they try and hammer you down. I've just been through the same experience after having my eye surgery last September. So it still happens. And it's, even though I'd been through what I had with my brain, it totally knocked me again to think I'm sitting there and these people are not listening to me, and they allowed me to get poorly and more poorly. And, then you have to go for that second opinion. So yes, definitely, you can get misdiagnosed. And also sometimes it is because the symptoms do relate to a lot of other different,
That's so wrong, isn't it? That so many people are not believed when we all know our own bodies incredibly well. And I think there's often processing then of that period when you haven't been believed, and then you get the diagnosis. And thank you again for sharing that. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of the time that we've got allocated today, but actually there are several more questions in the chat. There's lots of comments. I think this is the type of webinar where we could do double the length of time. We'd still have things to talk about. So Sandra, Michael, Carol, thank you ever so much. I can see from the chat it's been so well received. Just a couple of things before we finish. We've had some questions raised in the chat and in the Q&A. We haven't been able to get to all of those, but please do get in touch. Our volunteer manager, Tracy, put the email address for the helpline in the chat. So have a look at that. Just to repeat, it's helpline@cavernoma.org.uk. So we have a helpline. You can book a telephone call. You can also email in. We've got buddying, where you can be matched with somebody on a long-term one-to-one basis. We've got in-person meetups. They're going to be happening again in March in Brain Awareness Week, right and up and down the country. Michael mentioned our monthly online chat. We have that in the morning and the afternoon. There's a community chat, and there's also a therapeutic chat led by a counsellor, and we've got our counselling as well. So what we want you to know is you're not alone, and we're here to support you through this. And Sandra, Michael, Carol, I know you'll be helping other people feel less alone with how they're feeling. And you've given some really, really good suggestions for what will help.